The question set is a great culminating activity that takes all the things that you've learned about different question types up to this point and allows you to combine them into one comprehensive activity. The different question types that you've learned to create up to this point can all be integrated into a comprehensive exam. Question set is going to be our first culminating H5P activity, and it's a great example of where H5P rewards you for learning smaller activities first. The concept behind question set is to take these different question types that you've been learning to create up until now and combine them all into one cohesive exam. Since this is a more comprehensive activity type, you're going to see additional options that you won't typically see on other activities. Like other activities, we'll add our title, but this has an option called Quiz Introduction. This is an optional display that would show as your learners open up the quiz. If you choose to display the introduction, you can include things like a title and introductory text. This would be very, very helpful if you want to give the learners some sort of prompt about the exam they're about to take. It is worth noting that the question set is not a very advanced exam platform like the Moodle quiz activity would be. If you wanted a more advanced exam experience, including advanced reporting, or the ability to do things like limit when the exam is actually available or how long the timer goes when the students are taking it, then we strongly suggest looking at the Moodle quiz instead. But if this is a more short form pop quiz type of exam, question set would be a really good option. In our example here, I'll go ahead and set up an introduction. Now that I've set my introduction, let's move on to the actual setup of the quiz. There are a few notable options. One is to include a background image in your quiz. You can also control things like how progress is indicated to your learners. I prefer the dot style, but you can also try textual. You can also set a pass percentage to indicate what score the students have to attain to successfully pass this quiz. I'll set mine to 80. Then we come to the questions portion of the question set or quiz, and this is where you're ultimately rewarded for all of the work that you've done up to this point. Use the question type menu to select a question type to add into your quiz. You may notice that there are 3 question types on this list that we have not covered up to this point. The first is drag and drop, which we'll cover next week. The second is mark the words, which we don't recommend using because it's not an accessible question type. And the third is the essay question type, which we don't recommend using because it doesn't behave in a way that you might expect. For example, in an essay question in a Moodle quiz, you can see what the students wrote and you can write back a reply to them. You can manually grade it. The H5P essay question type, however, requires you as the instructor to pre-write an exemplary response to the question. When the students submit their response, it's compared to yours to try and see how similar they are. Then it does not save the learner's submission at all. It's a very unusual function. We're not really a big fan of this question type, which is why we don't cover it or recommend it. But let's take a look at one of the other question types that we've already created, like multiple choice. When I select that, it loads the multiple choice question creation interface directly within the question set quiz. This is the exact same interface that you learned to use when you were creating your first multiple choice question. It is technically possible to take something like a multiple choice question you've already created and add it to this question set, but we'll cover that later in this course since it's more of an advanced feature. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and add some questions to this quiz. I do want to note before I do that if you need to add a new question, you would just click the Add Question button over on the left, select a new question type, and add in that question type. Like in other question types, you can rearrange questions by clicking the arrow icons over on the left, or remove questions entirely by clicking the X. Thankfully, adding the questions is the easy part since you've already learned how to do that, but there are some additional settings on this page that I think are worth taking a closer look at. Directly beneath the Add Question section, you'll see 3 of them. One is to disable backwards navigation. This means that as your learners answer questions, they will not be able to go back and change their answers. You can also configure your question set quiz to randomize the order of the questions. This might help make the quiz more substantial from an academic integrity standpoint. Building on that, you can also control the number of questions that are shown. For example, say I add 10 questions to this question set, but I tell it to only show 5. It will then randomly pull 5 questions from my pool of 10, further securing this quiz. These settings are all optional, but you can enable them if you want to. We're admittedly a little on the fence about showing this next part, but since this is your first week in the course, we will mention that there are additional settings in the finished section within the question set. There are quite a few options in here that can do quite a few different things, So if you are feeling overwhelmed, we would encourage you to not go any further just now and stick with what you've learned up to this point. When you feel more confident, come back and do check this section. For those of you who feel a little bit more comfortable diving in at this point, there are quite a few options in here about what happens after the students submit their exam. This includes things like whether or not they can see their results or what the correct answer was. There are also customization options for the type of feedback that's provided to the learners, including feedback based off of score ranges. If you opt to show solutions or retry buttons, you can also control what the question text says on those buttons. Finally, and we find this to be a little interesting, but we have not seen many people use this feature just yet, you can set a video to play once the quiz is submitted by the learner. In fact, you can have one video play if they've passed the quiz, and another video play if they've failed. Again, this would require more content creation on your part, and it is more of an advanced feature, but if this interests you, we just wanted you to know that it's here.